And let's continue with this, the second chapter of The Face in the Frost. Please excuse the noise of the heater in the background, and there is also work being done on the roof here at Kent Kentley Studios. There will be some background noise. Inside the low echoing wet dirt tunnel, the noise of the rushing water was weirdly magnified and distorted into a hollow tinny roar. A shout or a hand clap came whanging back at you immediately from a low curving roof. Prospero and Roger, sliding farther and farther into this claustrophobic gloom, stood on the high ornamented poop of their absurd ship and watched the shrinking half-moon of light cast by the lantern they had left on the floor of the cave. Two tiny alcohol-burning stern lamps cast a flickering moth-light on the wizards, who now turned to the task of keeping up their spirits until the Actaeon sailed out into the sunny lake. The ship itself was entertaining because it was so intricately detailed. There were gleaming rows of brass cannon, nickel-plated swinging lanterns that worked, and in the captain's cabin, rows of books, real books, mostly on nautical subjects. Even the purple liquids in the little flattened decanter turned out to be wine, though they were, if anything, too small for the ship. The wizards still thought of it as tiny, and were endlessly fascinated by the discovery of new details. A cupboard that opened on scrolled brass hinges, a box within the cupboard that held delicate jade and ivory chessmen. The wheel, of course, worked, and Prospero had roped it down so that the ship would follow the straight flow of the current. Though all the lamps, lanterns, and candles on board were lit, the sides of the cave could not be seen, and periodic flashes of magic lightning were needed to assure them that the little bobbing toy was still in the middle of the stream. As the Actaeon sailed on into the noisy darkness, Prospero and Roger heard faintly disquieting sounds. The plip that might be a clod of earth falling from the ceiling onto the water, the splop that probably was a small water animal sliding off some unseen shore into the stream. And there was another sound, one which was harder to signal out from the others and define. It was only a little different from the normal rushing water sound, yet it was there, a hissing and foaming that was getting more and more distinct. At first, Prospero thought rapids and shivered, but it was the sound of water flowing through something, not over it. He got up from the powder keg on which he had been sitting and motioned to Roger, who was up on the quarterdeck, trying to compute the speed of the ship. Together they went to the forecastle and stood, peering into the blackness ahead. The little swinging lamps that hung near them were not much help, so Prospero and Roger struck their staffs together. A bright red light, dripping like a fireworks flare, hung around them for a few minutes, and by that garish light they saw a mesh of some kind strung across their path. It was held by a rigid black square frame that was awkwardly jammed into the tunnel's rough walls at a point where the opening was lower and narrower than usual. Prospero and Roger struggled with the capstan, but the anchor was either decorative or stuck. The ship drifted on, yawing a little in the current, until it bumped more gently than Prospero had hoped against the strange wall. Prospero set off another flare and suddenly realized what the obstruction was. It was a window screen. His window screen. He saw the place where he had scratched with a nail, bedroom southeast corner, and remembered the theft, the broken cellar window of 3 years before. Roger stared at him with understanding and fear. The ship bumped against the screen, and the water shed through 1,000 tiny openings. As Prospero's eyes got used to the dark, he saw that there was a little ledge nearby on one side of the tunnel, and behind it was the deep blackness of a cave. Now from the cave came a scrabbling, grunting, clumping sound, and out of the ragged openings crawled a hairy, angular shape. 2 red eyes glowed in the darkness. Prospero could have lit the tunnel for a better look, but the magic was not endless, and anyway, he knew what the thing was. So did Roger, who gripped his own staff tightly. And now, a sneering, gritty voice. Well, I hear this noise, so I says to myself, fresh fish. But it ain't. It's a couple of little men in a toy boat. Prospero leaned over the side and shouted, "We are wizards, troll! And if you don't let us through this thing, we'll turn you into a rock at the bottom of this stinking, filthy, slopey stream." The troll snickered a nasal snorting sound. If you're wizards, you can blast your own hole in my screen, can't you? But you ain't done it, because you can't. So I think I'll have some nice stewed wizard dumplings, or... Here he held up the tiny white bones of some animal and rattled them together. Wizard gizzard! Troll, said Prospero quietly, with both hands on the rail. I am going to turn you into lead. A few centuries from now, someone will find you and use you for a lawn ornament. Oh, shut up, you mouthy little bug, said the troll. I'm going to watch you a few minutes, and then... He twisted his hands as if he were wringing out a cloth. Prospero closed his eyes and tried to think. He had been reading about trolls the night Roger came, but now he could think of nothing that would help him. He couldn't even grapple physically with the troll, since the spell that made the two men smaller lasted till sunset, which was at 8 p.m. that day. His watch said 5. Picking up his staff and throwing it down in anger, he turned to Roger, but Roger was gone. All right, said the troll, lowering his webby feet into the water. You two ain't no fun no more. You'll probably taste like water rats, but... A hatch clattered behind Prospero, and Roger reappeared, carrying a length of rope from which a 4-pronged grappling hook hung. Standing a little back from the rail, Roger whirled the grapnel, whistling around his head. Then he let go. The hook raked the screen but fell into the water, and Roger quickly started to reel it in. The troll was still sitting on the muddy bank, his feet in the sloshing water. This is more like it, he said. He clapped his hands, and when he pulled them apart, they went fuck like suction cups. Climb on the top and fall over, and then I can rescue you. Roger threw the grapnel again, and this time the pronged iron went chunk into the screen. 2 spurs were wedged tight. Now Roger whipped the rope around the mainmast and started to pull. Prospero suddenly saw what was going on, and in a second he was pulling too. A large, ragged piece of the screen ripped out, crumbling as it fell, and splattering the deck with red flakes of rust. The troll stood up and started to stoop forward, but Prospero gathered all his strength and blacked out the tunnel. For several minutes the place was absolutely dark. It was filled with thick, palpable, gross darkness, and while the murk lasted, the little boat slipped through the hole. One scuttering wire scraped the bottom of the hole from one end to the other, and for a sickening instant the boat slowed. But then it bobbed through, wallowed sideways in the current for a bit, and straightened out to sheer its course down the middle of the fast-flowing stream. The troll still held his eyes and screeched, for he thought he had been struck blind. Roger and Prospero were far downstream when the lights went on again. And that's the end of chapter 2.